Okay, we're up to Chaf Hey Amid Beis, the last word on the page. And we're discussing again the halachas of Avelis and Kriya, and very interesting, very Baruch Hashem, very Shmachik Gemara. You know what I mean. The Eila Kroyin, She'em Misachim. We said, guys, we spoke at earlier. Let's go back a few daf in our minds. For you can't within 7 days, you're not allowed to go ahead and put a stitch, a temporary stitch. After 7 days, you could put a temporary stitch, but you can't permanently sew it. After 30 days, you can permanently sew it, with the exception of a parent that even after 30, you ain't misachta lo'ilam. Lashon of misachta is to permanently sew. Says the Brisa, the elu karoyin she'ein misachin. These are the people, it says in Masechta Smachos, that you rip for, and you're not misachin, and you never, it's similar to a parent, you'll never permanently, mend the beged. Hakoira al aviv al imay, someone who rips for his father and his mother. Okay, that we already saw. The al Rabbi shalim doy Torah, on his Rabbi that taught him Torah. The Rabbi that taught you Torah, right? That you rip and you do not sew. We'll see in a second exactly who that Rebbe is. Val Nasi, on the Melech, the descendant of David. Vial Bezdin, the head of the Bezdin. Vial Shmus Arois, bad news. We can hear bad news about Roy V'Klal Yisrael, or most of Klal Yisrael. Val Birchas Hashem Lo Yaleinu, you hear someone, this is Lashon Sagina, someone who benches Hashem, it's the opposite. Vial Sefer Torah Shnisraf, and a Sefer Torah that burnt. Val Ori Yehuda, on the cities of Yehuda. Vial Migdash, and on the seeing the Chorban, the Yerushalayim and seeing Yerushalayim. Good? You're going to go ahead and you're going to rip, and you're not going to mend it. You're not going to, you'll baste it, you'll go ahead and put a temporary stitch, but you won't permanently stitch. None of these things. Okay. Says let's see the Taisus on the Amid base, not the Amid base, yesterday's Amid base. Guys, yesterday's Amid base. Rabbi Shalom du Chachma, Pirish Perakelu Metzias, Pligi Reb Yehuda to Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, right, they argue. We have our guess is Rabbi Shalom du Torah. Rashi, Taisus guess is Rabbi Shalom du Chachma. So says Taisus, Machloikus and Rabbi Yehuda, who is that? Who qualifies? Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Kol Sheroiv Chachmas Iman. Anyone, most of your Chachma comes from that individual. Rabbi Yossi Omer, I feel like here ain't of El Mishnah Achas. Even he only taught you one Mishnah. Zo Rabbi. Umasik Sham. And they conclude over there, Ula Amar, Talmidei Chacham Shebabavel, Karim Zal's the Rabbi Yossi, like Rabbi Yossi. Sfirlei. Upoisik Rabbi Sheshes, Rabbi Yossi. They're like Rabbi Yossi, that even if he taught you one Mishnah, Uper Sheben Chananel, the Hachi Hilcha. So that's the Lacha. However, Shiltus Rabbi Chai, Poisik Rabbi Yehuda, Dama Kol Shrev Chachmas Leimenu. Okay, anyone who's Rav Chachma is from him. That's the person that the majority of your Torah you got from that individual, you would rip, and you would then what? You would not mend. You would not mend it. It would stay similar to a parent. It would stay, in a state of, carelessness. It would not be ripped, not be mended. Continues the Gemara. For Rabbi Shalim the Torah Minol, how do you know that your kareya for someone who taught you Torah the chsiv? Now it says the pasuk says by Elisha. Elisha was the Talmud Muvik of Eliyahu Hanavi, and the Gemara is describing when Eliyahu Hanavi ascended to Shemayim. So the pasuk says, "Elisha ra v'hu matzik." Elisha saw that Eliyahu was brought up and he ascended, but he ascended in a cloud, in a pillar of fire with a chariot, and it says, "Avi Avi Rechav Yisrael Prashav." Avi Avi. He never saw him anymore. And he took hold of his clothing, Elisha, and he ripped it into two rips. That's what it says. Now, where do you see that this means what? This means a Rebbe. He said Avi, right? Says the Gemara. Reading the passage again. Elisha Avi, Rechav Yisrael Pashav. Avi is of the Vimai. Rechav Yisrael Pashav. Who is that? The Rabbi Shlim Dei Torah. My mashma. How do you know that? What Rechav Yisrael? Mitargim, like Targim Rabbi Yosef. He's Mitargim Avi to mean Rebbe. the Toiv Lahain Yisrael, who was good to Yisrael, but Siluse with his tefillas, Misrachimim Uproshim, like the cavalry and the chariots. So you see that they touch Avi as Rebbe. So you see that when Elisha took his beged and ripped it, and he ripped it in two, so too for a Rebbe, that your Rebbe Muvik to teach you Torah, right? That you would go ahead and so I saw Psakalach as Rebbe Muvik. Anyone Rav Chachma means can be wisdom and other things, but Rebbe Muvik is someone that you got most of your Torah from. Somebody you got most of your Torah from. That is a person that you rip and you don't mend. One, how do you know? Good. So you've proven for your Rebbe you rip, but how do you know you don't mend it? We're up to Chav Vav and Aleph. How do you know you don't mend it? About 10 lines down. Parallel to the Taisvis Mashkem Mishchem. How do you know that you don't mend it? And he took hold of his beged, and he ripped them up. He ripped them up into two parts. When it says that he ripped it up, any idea shnayim? Obviously, guys, if you rip something, it's got to be two. You know what it means that he ripped it into two? That it's going to remain two forever. You know why? Because you'll never be able to mend it. So therefore, we know that you can't mend such a thing. Amalei Reish Lakish, says Reish Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan, Eliyahu Chayhu. Why is he ripping? Eliyahu was alive. We know Eliyahu was Chay v'Kayam, right? So why is he ripping? So Rabbi Yochanan told Reish Lakish, Kimin Dechsiv, V'loi Reu Oid. Since he said what? He never saw him anymore. L'gabi didei k'meis tami. L'gabi the days k'meis. I think it's a bracha. If you didn't see your friend for a long time, make baruch Mechai Mason, right? Make baruch Mechai Mason. So it would be very kishmak with this Gemara, right? He didn't see him anymore. So he was okay. Next halacha is we're going back over the Mishnah, each case one by one. How do you know that A, you rip, and B, and now we're ready. How do you know that you don't mend it? It says Nasi v'av bezdin. How do you know that you rip for the king and the Av Bezdin, the descendant of the king? Ushmuas Royce and bad news, Minalan. It says, Vayechazek David. Okay, here's the background. David is busy. He ran away. David was on the run from Shaul. He ended up settling with Achish and in Siklag. And Shaul goes to war against the Pelishtim. And in the battle, Shaul loses his life. Yehonasan loses his life, and other members of Shaul's family, and a lot of people in Klal Yisrael died. Comes along a Nara Maleki, carrying Shaul's Nezav Etz Adav. He was carrying his tefillin, and he showed David about the Petira of Shaul. And Yehonasan, this is David's reaction to that Petira. Says okay, now. It's similar to Elisha, similar pasuk. He grabbed hold of his beged, and he ripped it. And also all the men that were with David ripped their clothing. V'yispadu, give a hesped, v'yivchu, and they cried, v'yitzumu ad erev, they fasted until the evening. Al Shaul, v'al Yehonasan beno, v'al Am Hashem v'al Beis Yisrael. So it's important, guys. Al Shaul, Al Yehonasan beno, v'al Am Hashem v'al Beis Yisrael. He naflu b'cherev. Shaul, who is Shaul? Said Nasi, means the Melech. The Nasi is the Melech, the descendant of the Melech. Yehonasan, Ze Av Bezdin. Yehonasan, guys, was the Av Bezdin. Al Am Hashem v'al Beis Yisrael, Eilish Shmuas Rois. Now, exactly what Roiv Yisrael is, what it means over here. The Yisraelim struggle to figure out exactly what's going over here. What does it mean, Shmuas Roiv Yisrael? Some people say it's Roiv Shavit. You know, there's Allah Roiv Shavit. It's not so pashut. Maybe in order to rip, you need all three, meaning you need a Nasi to die, then the Avbezna to die, and rightfully so to die. Amalei, Al Hefsik, Al Shaul, Al Yehonasan, Al Beis Yisrael, Al Hashem, Al Beis Yisrael. In other words, the Baal is mafsik that each one, Bifnei Atzmai, is Roy for what? For Kriya. Fred Gemara, Umi Karina Shmuas Rois, you're telling me that Klal Yisrael was there, and you got a bad piece of news about Klal Yisrael that you rip. They told Shmuel, the Amar Shmuel, Katal Shavar Malka, he was the king of Persia. Katal Shavar Malka, Tresa Alpha Yudoi b'Mizigas Kesari, that Shavar Malka killed 12,000 Jews in the city of Mizigas Kesari. And he didn't rip. So you see that what Shmuel was, you don't rip. Says no, you don't rip. You only say by Roiv Tziba, but whatever Roiv Tziba is. The Ritva brings that you didn't. If Roiv Tziba was asif, even if you didn't kill them, but they were asif in the battle, right? If Roiv Tziba came together, right? Roiv Tziba u'maisa shahaya, and like Shalom behind the sun, it has to be similar to that where you have a multitude of people. Mashen came. 12,000 people is a tremendous tragedy, but it doesn't qualify as what a Shmuas Rois. Fred the Gemara, just a side point, Umi Katal Shava Malka Yudoi, the Shava Malka killed Jews. The Amalei Shava Malka Lishmuel, Shava Malka told Shmuel, Tasili, it should be a reward for me. Like Katli Yudoi Mi'olam, I never killed Jews. So how can you just tell me why he killed 12,000 Jews? And for the Gemara, no, he did kill Jews, but not willingly. Hasam Inu Gamilam Shai, they're the Jews, they brought it upon themselves. Ravami said, "L'kol Yiseri de Mezigas Kesare," because of the music that was played by the people of Kesari, because they were rebelling. Pakashur de Lukya, the walls of the town of Lukya were cracked. I mean, they brought it upon themselves. They rebelled. So willingly, Shava Malka and kill. Obviously, if you rebel against the king, you go against them. You're going to go ahead and you're going to die. Now, so therefore, we've proven of the Imo we know already. Al Rabbi Shalim de Torah is from Elisha. Al Nasi from Shaul. Al Abbas and Yehona's son. Shmuel Rois, because again from the battle of Yehonas against the Pelishtim. The Al Birchas Hashem Minola. Now the background over here is that the king of Ashur, right? The Sancheriv came up and he's sieging Yerushalayim, and he sends a messenger, Rav Shakeh. Rav Shakeh was a Yisrael Mumma, and basically they didn't want to make peace and whatever. And he says, no, and Rav Shakeh is telling him that what? He said that, we conquered this nation and this nation and this nation and this nation, basically, and he said, and no God's going to stop us. That was considered blasphemous. And this is the event. These are the words that describe the event. So Al Birchas Hashem Minolan that you rip Kriya, Dechsiv, Vayovi al Yaakon ben Chilkiah Shal Abayis, he was the head on the Beis Hamikdash. The Shevna Soifer, he was the Soifer. The Yoach ben Osef Hamasker al Chizkiyahu Krui Begodim, and what was the name? Yoach ben Osef Hamasker al Chizkiyahu, and they came and they were Krui Begodim. They were ripped. You know why they ripped? Because they heard Rav Shakeh was blasphemous. He was Mavarach the shame. Anyone who hears it, not only if someone who hears it directly, but even if you hear it told over, however, the ones who say it over, why? In other words, Eidim are saying over what they heard. So obviously they ripped already when they heard it. When they say it over a second time, the person who hears their testimony has to rip. But the Eidim don't have to rip a second time because they ripped the first time. Right? Because B'Shosh Hashamu my have. Fred the Gemara, when they heard it, Shama Hashta, good they heard it once, they should hear it again. They should rip again. Good, because they're saying it a second time. Let's not get to say that. Why? It says, Vayihi, and it was, Vayihi Kishmaya HaMelech Chizkiyahu, V'yikra Es Begodov, Vayischas B'sak Vayovi Beis Hashem. So now we have the Edis of El Yaakon and Shevna and Yoyach coming and testifying to Chizkiyahu what happened. Chizkiyahu's reaction was what? It says that he went ahead, Vayikres Begodov, HaMelech Kara, the Melech ripped, the Haim and the Eidim, and El Yaakon and Shivna and Yoyach Loikaru, they didn't rip. So good, you rip, but how do you know you don't mend it? It says, I'm going to ask you Kriya. We learn that Kriya from Rashi says David. They take out the Girsa from Elisha, where it says Lashon Kriya. From Elisha will be the better source because it says openly, right? It says that it was ripped in. It doesn't say by David it was ripped into two parts. There it says by Elisha, it says V'yikroyim he ripped it l'shnayim, kroyim. He ripped it into two parts. So it's more openly to learn how to gezer shava of kriya that it's not mendable from Elisha. Sefer Torah, so therefore, now continuing along the Brisa, Sefer Torah, now there's not only a Sefer Torah, fellas, there's also any swarm. Not only a Sefer Torah, it's a Sifrei Kodesh, any Sifrei Kodesh, as we're going to see, a scroll, not a scroll, not this, I think a scroll, like a, let's say you have a nach, parchment ripped up, a cloth. What? Okay, now, Sefer Torah, it says, Vayihi, and Vayihi kikroi Yehudi sholish tolos va'arba yikreha besar. You read 2 or 3 psukim and they ripped it what? Besar. Okay, here's the background over here. Yirmiyahu is prophesizing about the destruction if they don't do tshuva. He talk about a guy who had a tough life. Yirmiyahu had a really tough life. He's prophesying. He's telling people to do tshuva. The base of is going to be destroyed. No one's listening. He wrote it down. He wrote it down, and we call him Megillah Seicha. So now he's brought to the king. This king was a Russian Yakum. Let's see what happens. Vayikar Yehudi Shalish Dolce Arba Vayikreha Betar Haseifa Vahashtech Ala Eish Asher La'och, and he went ahead and he threw what into the fire. He threw it into the fire, and said the pasuk then continues like Vachaduv like Karu Es B'Dayim Hamelech V'Chalabodim Ishmiu Es Kol Advar Me'elu. So again, so the pasuk, guys, so he hears it, and they throw it into the fire, and it says like Pachadu like Karu Es B'Dayim. The people that were there because of the king, they weren't scared. They didn't rip their clothing. They didn't rip their clothing because of the fear of the king. But however, l'chayra, you should rip your clothing. That's the raya. So it says the Gemara, "My shalish los fa'arba." So amlo leYakam, they said to Yoyakam, "Kasav Yirmiyah Sefer Kinos." He wrote Sefer Kinos. He wrote Eicha. So amalahu maksiv. They want to know what's written it. So is Eicha Yashva Badad? So amalahu Ana Malka. I'm still the king. In other words, escape the Shon. He didn't care about the people. He cared about himself. A real politician. He cared about himself. So therefore, when he said Eicha Yashva Badad, hey, I'm still the king. That's the first pasuk. Second pasuk, Amalei Bachay Sifke Balayla. Right? So he says, Ana Malka, I'm still the king. Golsa Yehuda Meoni, Ana Malka, I'm still the king. Pasuk number 4, Darchet Tzion Aveles, Ana Malka, I'm the king. Hayutzarel L'Roish, your enemies, what will be? Amalahu, Ma Amra, Ki Hashem Hoiga Al Roif Pesheha, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu caused this because the Roiv Yepeshoyim. So what did he do? So what did he do? Miyad Kader Kol Askaroi Sheba. He took a razor and had cut out all the names of Hashem. The Sarfim Beish, and he threw them in fire. Behind the Chsiv lePachadu leKoros Bigdayim. The Chlal they didn't rip then Mechal the Boy Lekriya that you have to go ahead and rip. Gemara doesn't seem to say that. Well, how do you know you don't mend? I guess they learn that Kriya from once we have that established that Gezer Shava, so you don't have to repeat it again. Amar Pabla Abaya, Ema Mishum Shmur Sarois. Guys, how do you know they ripped because they burnt the name of Hashem? Maybe they ripped because of the bad news that the base of English is going to be destroyed. What bad Shmur was in that day? Shmur means past, guys. Shmur means in the past. This is a nevuah. It didn't happen yet. Adrabah. A nevuah ra is subject to change depending on. He wasn't telling them to make them feel bad. He was telling them to do tshuva. So it's not a shmur ra yet. A shmur ra is after the battle and they're dead in battle. That's a shmur ra. Amrav Chelba Rav Huna. Haraya Sefer Torah Shenikra. Someone sees the Sefer Torah. It's ripped. Chayiv l'kroy. This is the halacha, guys. Chayiv l'kroy shtei kriyos. You chayiv to rip two times. Achas al gvil, once on the parchment that was ripped. V'achas al ksav, and one of the words that were ripped. Shnemar achrei sroif hamelech es hamegillah v'es hadvarim. So the Megillah and the Dvarim, two separate things. Rav Ava Rav Huna Barachia Havayasli Kamed Rav Abba. Boy, Lafnuye, Rav Abba had to go to the bathroom. Shakle to Tufte. He put his tefillin, and Achte Abe, he put his tefillin on some type of place. Achte Abe Sadi. He put it on a cushion. Osi Base Bas Neimasa came along an ostrich. And boy, lemivla, ostrich will eat anything. If you've ever been around ostriches, they'll eat anything. Yeah, I'm in Israel. We were in a safari. The glass, everything. They eat anything. Yeah. Right. Okay. Anyway. So they want to eat tefillin. He's not a veterinarian. Yeah, I don't think so. So because in other words, if he would have taken it away, I'd be chayiv to rip twice. So I'm like, how do you know this? But right? So it says Gemara, I had to think. That you have to rip only if it's taken bizroya with strength. Like what? Like the maisa of Yaakov when he cut it out and ripped it. In other words, over here, l'chayra, you could have done something about it. It wasn't, and you could have stopped the ostrich, and it wasn't like the Nazis Yimach Shemam taking the Sefer Torah and you couldn't do anything about it, right? Not something like that. That situation didn't exist. So therefore, it's very, very interesting. There's a Chuvas Chacham Tzvi that says for you to rip, you have to witness the actual burning of the Sefer Torah. If you, let's say a Sefer Torah, town burns down and there's not, you have to witness the actual burning of the Sefer Torah. But listen, like the other thing, but you see, if you'd see it burnt, we went to Yeshiva Eastern Parkway. We had Yeshiva Eastern Parkway in 1966. It was 66. I think could be 68 or 69. Mets World One Series. Yeah. Anyway, but it's my life. I'm going back on my life. Yankel, whatever happened to you? It's my gig. Yankel. It's like, we'll give you a chance in a second, Yankel. Jets and the Knicks and the Mets. Well, the Jets and the Mets. I have to cut you off. Sorry. Okay. Anyway, so again, they burnt down the yeshiva, burnt down. They burnt the base medrash, and remember there was a big head. There was no levaya for the Sefer Torah. There was levaya for the Sefer Torah, but we didn't rip. We didn't rip our clothing. What? Excuse me? Yeah, it was awesome. Awesome. It was awesome.
Does it mean burnt or destroyed? I mean, so recently they had the floods, and you saw that there were Sefer Torah that were destroyed by
Germany. What? He lost his Sefer Torah. He's talking. He's totally just like,
It's all right.
No, he's not talking.
He was on Zoom.
Huh?
Or it's a flood and it's ruined.
I hear. Again, I don't know the answer to that. But again, I know there's this famous tshuva. There was a big fire in Prague, and the Shus Yaakov is sent to yesterday whether he has to go ahead and even Sfarim, because he lost his Sfarim. He lost all his Sfarim, he lost, so he burnt. And we see from this Gemara that it's Lav Dafka Sefer Torah, because you see that Eicha was not a Sefer Torah, and they priced Kriya on that. So any Sefer that would have the Shem Hashem written in it, you'd have that problem. So I don't know exactly if it's erased or burnt, or I'm not sure. I don't know, but it's a good question. Okay, now, Ari Yehuda Minalan. How do you know the Ari Yehuda? How do you know the Ari Yehuda that you see them, you have to go ahead and write Kriya? Now, these people did not know the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. They didn't know the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, and it says, "Vayavo anashim mishchem mishiloi mishomram shmeina ish 80 men migulchei zakein ukrei begadim." They were what? Their heads were shorn, and their clothing was ripped. Right, the clothing was ripped. Umisguided them. They banded together. So they were bringing what? Because they were bringing karmanis. And so what do you see? That since they passed by the cities of Yehuda, and they ripped their clothing. Amrav Chelboy, Amrullah Bira, that was his name. Amrav Laza Araya Ari Yehuda b'Charbana. You have a pasuk. The pasuk says, what do you say? Ari Kotshecha Hayim Midbar. Your cities of Kedusha are now like desolate, like a midbar. V'karei and Yerip. Yerushalayim, the Churban of Yerushalayim, and the Churban Amar Tzia in Midbar Haisa Yerushalayim Shemama. V'karei and Yerip. Beis Hamikdash b'Charbana Amar Beis Kotshenu v'Tefartenu Asher Hidelucha v'Seinu Hayla Sreifas Eish v'Chol Nachma Seinu Hayla Lecharva v'Karei and Yerip. Okay, the Brisa said above, Karei al Hamikdash u'Moisef al Yerushalayim. You rip on the Mikdash and you don't give a new rip, guys, on Yerushalayim, but you extend the rip on the Mikdash. That's Moisef means you're adding on to an existing rip. So you would tear your clothing on the Beis Hamikdash, and then you would go ahead and continue on Yerushalayim. So mashma, it's one ripping. Whether someone hears, or someone sees. Since you come to Tzoifim, where you could look and see Yerushalayim, so you see from here, guys, you're ripping twice, two separately. You're ripping on Yerushalayim where you're in Tzoifim, and you're ripping on the Beis Hamikdash. So how do you explain this? It says over here, you rip on the Mikdash and you extend it, and here you have two separate rippings. So you rip al Mikdash with the Yatzma, Yerushalayim with the Yatzma, like Kasha. Had the pagab and Mikdash bereisha, had the pagab Yerushalayim bereisha. Guys, if you pagab and Mikdash bereisha, so now if I end up in the Beis Hamikdash, I see that first, and then I see Yerushalayim, so you would add on. If, however, you see Yerushalayim first, and then the Beis Hamikdash, then you'd have two separate rippings. So if you coming and you saw Tzoifim, I'll give you a second, Mandy. I'll even know what your question is. Your question is, how can you see Beis Hamikdash rather than Yerushalayim? Okay, so that's again. So now you have the, if you see the Yerushalayim, you rip. Then you see the Beis Hamikdash, you rip. But if you see in the Beis Hamikdash, right, and then Yerushalayim, then what? Then you would extend. Now, so Mendy's asking, how could you possibly see the Beis Hamikdash without seeing Yerushalayim? What? I guess Har Hazeisim is part of Yerushalayim. Yeah, proper. Guys, take a look at Rashi. You don't have to say such. Look at Rashi, guys. Had the pag of Mikdash Bereisha kigoyin shenichnas Yerushalayim b'shida tevu migdal. The loyra Yerushalayim. You go in a black Mercedes with tinted windows, it's going to shine.
You showed a picture of Chaim had black in his eyes.
Yeah.
Driving to his person. And he only opens it when he gets
Yeah.
there.
Wow.
He's not driving.
Who's not
He
driving?
doesn't want to see the streets of Yerushalayim. No. He's going to the post office.
Right. He said he doesn't open his eyes until he gets to the post.
He's going to the old city to hang out.
I'm agreeing with you. He's not arguing with you.
No.
A little aggressive tonight, huh? A little feisty. Got a little feisty. A weekend goes by, we don't get together. Look what happens.
So you can handle people in Philly. You can handle this shit.
Huh?
Okay, Harry, make peace. I'll bring you somewhere extra, Harry.
Okay, anyway, weiter. Tanrabanan. For Kulon Rishoyim L'Shaylalon, all that I mentioned above, the Rabbi, the Nasi, the Avbezdin, the Chaybis Yehuda, all these that we mentioned, Rishoyim L'Shaylalon, you can't go ahead and mend them, but you have Rishus to go ahead and Shaylalon, L'Maydalon, L'Laikton, L'Asayson, Sulamais, different types of stitches, all temporary stitches, different types of stitches. Right? I saw a picture of the Sulamais, picture the football, the pigskin, the laces. So it looks like a ladder, rungs on ladders. So they have a cut, they would have a type of stitch like that, like rungs on ladders. But you can't go ahead and permanently mend it. Remember, Chista, Alexandria. When we speak about mending, we're speaking about Alexandria mending, which seems to be very, very much that you can't even recognize it. So now let's say the following. Let's say you had a temporary mending, and you're wearing this clothing, and now you heard a bad basura again that you have to rip again. So hakareya b'soich hashalo, b'soich hamalo, b'soich halaket, b'soich sulamais. Anyone who rips on those temporary stitches that we described on the Amid Aleph, lo yotza, you won't be yotza. Why? Because it's not since it's temporary, it's considered still ripped. However, mitocha ichui, if you go ahead and rip a one that had been mended correctly, then what? Then you'll be yotze mitzvahs kriya. Number of chista ubi ichui Alexandria. What are we speaking about? We're speaking about Alexandrian amending. Tonabanan. You have a beged. You want to go ahead that you're not able to go ahead and mend it. So turn it over, make the hem into your top, and mend it. This is also to mend it. Just like someone sells a garment, it's also to go ahead and mend it. Someone who buys it will be also managed. They were so poor they buy ripped clothing. Like no. He has to tell him that, you know what, you're buying this ripped clothing, you won't be able to fix it permanently. When you initiate the kriya, it's a tefach. Like we just spoke about, right? In Yerushalayim, if you're going to go ahead and add on to the kriya of the Beis Hamikdash, it'll be shalish spice, 3 etzbois. The Reb Meir. Yehuda says no. Yehuda says chilas kriya shalish etzbois. It's only 3 etzbois, not a tefach. The Tosefes is kolshu, and the Tosefes would be a little bit. Amrullah Allah Reb Meir b'kriya. Now what? It's a tefach. For Allah Reb Yehuda with Tosefes that it's a kolshu. Tanya Namihachi to substantiate this psak of Ula. Rabbi Yossi Yomer, the Tana Rabbi Yossi said chilas kriya is tefach. B'Tosefes kolshu, which is a hybrid of Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda. Tana Banan. Omuloi Meis Aviv. They said that your father was nifta, v'karoi, and he ripped. Then Leilenu Meis Benoi. He heard that what his son died. V'hoisif tachdoin, right? V'hoisif and he had it on. Stop. So in other words, his first ripping, guys, was like on the Beis Hamikdash, a full ripping, and the second ripping he was just moisif, like on the Yerushalayim. Then tachdoin misacher, the lower part you can go ahead and mend. Why? Because that is not ripping on your parent. That's not the price that we just mentioned. Elyoin, however, the upper part, eina misacher, the upper part you wouldn't be able to mend because that's the part you ripped on your parent, one's parent. Meis bino v'kara. Again, you have to rip on your son, le'aleinu. Meis aviv v'hoisif. Elyoin misacher. You can go ahead. The upper one you can go ahead, but tachton was on your father. Eina misacher you can't mend. Meis aviv, meis imay, meis achiv, meis achoisei le'aleinu. I was thinking about the Holocaust, right? I think about that, you know. Yeah, I still remember. My father was just nifta. I was just not in a good place. I went to the Yomid. It was in Shloshim. And a man came over to me. His name was Mr. Weiss. He said to me, you know, I have yard site today. So I went over to him and I said, you know, Neshama Shtavaliyah, he says to me, Neshamais. He goes, I lost my father, my mother, my sisters, my brother. Neshamais, all in one day. So, you know, you get to a Gemara like this and you have a pachad, guys. You have a pachad. Meis aviv, meis imay, meis achiv, meis achoisei, kareya kera echad. One ripping for all of them. L'kulan. Yehuda say Rabbi no. Al kulan kera echad. On all of them you rip one. Al aviv v'imay kara echad. And from father and mother you rip another one. L'fishay meisifim al kera aviv v'imay. Because you don't go ahead and add on to the rip of a mother and a father. Now, Rashi in Ksav Yad says, therefore we said above, the case where you rip for your son and then you moisif the father, no, it doesn't exist. He's arguing on that too. Because you need a separate ripping for one's parent. Again, so he's arguing that as well.
Mother and father.
Separate. My timer of Nachman Yitzchak lefisha ena b'toisefes, because what, a parent's not b'toisefes. Ama Shmuel halach Rabbi Yehuda and Beseira, halach Rabbi Yehuda and Beseira. Umi Ama Shmuel hachi, Ama Shmuel halach k'tibri hamekel be'evel. Guys, halach is like what is, right? In other words, you're always mekel. So why are you being machmir? You know, you should be able to be ma'isif. Says Gemara, avelis l'chud and kriya l'chud. If you remember, I told you that avelis and kriya, they're two totally different parshias. In Shulchan Aruch, shin mem is hilchas kriya, and then you have hilchas avelis. So very interesting psak. The Mukhi Yosef says that kriya is l'chud and kriya is l'chud and avelis is l'chud. Is why? Because the kriya takes place before the avelis. It's a separate thing, right? And for example, are you able to go ahead and sit shiva on chalamoid? Are you able to rip kriya on chalamoid? Yes, that was the Mishnah we said yesterday. The only ones who rip on chalamoid is the 7 relatives you behind the misabel. So with the fact that you rip on chalamoid, but what? But you don't say avelis chalamoid shows you what? Avelis l'chud and kriya l'chud. Right? We see that it's two separate things. Now, b'chedushi aran kosav v'yesh mefarshim mishum the kriya deraisa. Kriya is deraisa. Midechsiv Ubigdechem leisifromu. When Moshe tells Aaron and his sons, and your clothing leisifromu, you shouldn't rip. Machlal the kuliyam mechayev. Regular ovals mechayev. So meanwhile, other people say it's an asmachta, and Tosfos Rush agrees that it's the raisa. So it's very interesting. But the kriya lechud, the raya is a beautiful raya, right? The raya is a beautiful raya. Huh? Cheskel would be the raisa.
Right.
Yeah,
It would be the raisa.
would not be raisa. No. Dibbe kabbalah at best. Right. Dibbe kabbalah at best. Okay, very, very fascinating. Okay, we'll get to another. No, it's mamish packed. This is every line is brought down in Shulchan Aruch. Hilchos Aveil is like 20, 30 serves like this, one after the other. Oh, you see Masar Shas.
The Aveil for a parent is has to have its own kriya. How can you be Moisef on it?
What?
How can you add to the?
Very good. No, you can't be. You can be Moisef. You rip for your parent. But once you have an existing rip, you can be Moisef for one of the other relatives. It's not a parent.
Doesn't have to be separate.
Oh no, we did speak out. Later of Yehudim Beseira, if one ripped for a child or sister or brother, the Gemara said that I thought you just Moisef for the parent. He would disagree with that because that was the point that he argues in that as well. Okay, weiter. So kriya avel schud kriya lechud ad hechen kareya. Now this is speaking about the haisafa until where at tiburoi until your navel, your belly button. Ve'esham maliba to your heart. Now b'shem rayil dav zechel dav shnemar bekiru levavchem v'espigdechem. Okay, and it says bekiru levavchem v'espigdechem. Higila tiburoi. Once you reach your navel, and you have to rip more. So what do you do? In other words, you can't be Moisef. Again, you can't be Moisef. What do you do? Marchik shalosh etzbois. Go ahead and separate a distance of 3 etzbois from the rip. The kareya, and you start a new rip. Nismalim milfanov. If you rip so much in the front, machziru lachar. Turn the rip garment to the back and start the back side. Nismalim milmaila. Once you go ahead and it's on top, haifchu, you turn it over and milmata. But someone rips in the bottom from the sides, lo yatsa. Kohen gadol peirim milmata. Kohen gadol, he goes ahead and rips them below. And l'chayra, the Kohen gadol is a problem, right? Because he's not allowed to rip clothing. The answer is that since he's not ripping in the place that's normally ripping the bottom, that's agmas nefesh. Which see, you rip clothing doesn't have a din of a kriya. Yes, Mandy, what was your question?
I can't use the other side.
What? It ran out. That means when you did the other side, you finished your front. I mean, yeah, you both sides. Of Masnu Mar Ukva v'Tray Mishmei the Pligibor of Masnu Mar Ukva v'Tray Mishmei the Avu the Shmuel. They both the Levi. Chadam a Kol Shiva Kaira La'acha Shiva Moisef. If you go ahead and you hear you rip for a parent. You rip for later. One rip for one of his relatives, and now he gets a piece of news, right? So now he rips a new rip. Kol Shiva Kareya La'acha Shiva Moisef. After the news comes after Shiva, he would go ahead and be Moisef on that. V'chadama Kol Shloishim Kareya La'acha Shloishim Moisef. So we have machlokes. A new shmua of a relative, right? Do you go ahead and rip? Do you Moisef after 7 days or 30 days? Good. Like the first opinion, 7 days. Second opinion, 30 days. Master Reb Zera. Mandi Amakol Shiva Kareya. The one who says that you rip all 7. Amai. Why? You know why? Right? In other words, the reason why you have to have a new rip is because the first rip you can't go ahead and sew up. Now, all you can do is what is baste it. Good. But if it was basted, then you could rip. In other words, the reason in Shiva, guys, the reason why you can't be Moisef in 7, why you need a new rip, is because it's an existing rip already. You didn't do anything. It's an existing rip already, right? So what are you going to do? Add on to existing rip, you're going to rip it all. Why? Because in the 7 days, you know how to put a temporary stitch in. Mashma, if you could put a temporary stitch in, then you could rip, right? It says, we said a woman, right away, within 7 days, they pin it up, right? Right away, right? So Hachanami, what are you going to tell me that the news you get on another relative, the woman would be able to rip that. Because why? Because it's what? It's sewn up. No, Hasan Mishum Kavadishta. Of course you can't do it. Of course you need a new rip. Over there, the reason we did it out, so I'll sneos, I'll cover the Isha that she shouldn't be. Now, Manda Amar called Shloishim Kareya. The one that says all 30 days you rip. Amai. You know why? You know why you can rip? Because you can't extend it. You can't mend it. And therefore you can go and rip. That you can never go ahead and mend it. By a parent, one can't mend it. So Hachanami, would you need a new tear? Guys, in other words, you hear news after 30 days, in 7 months. You know you can't mend it. You can tell me you need a new tear? Hachanami, no, Hasam Shem covered of emo. No, of course you don't need a new tear. The reason we don't go, it's considered new, you can be meisef. The reason we don't let you do it is covered emo. Just like by the Isha, it doesn't mean that it's like it's a side point. It doesn't go ahead and affect. It's within 7 days, even if it's basted, it's considered ripped. And your parents, even though it's not mended, it's considered fixed. The reason you're not fixing it is because what? Because of covered your parents. Someone leaves with a beged karua lefnei hameis. In other words, he's walking out and he didn't rip it. He didn't rip it. It was a previously ripped beged and he's wearing it. Harizeh goizos a mason. He's stealing from the mason. Vesachayim. He's stealing from the mason. Why? Because he didn't rip for them. And he's stealing it's Gnevis Das to the Chayim because they think he did rip for them. Someone says to his friend, Hashileni chalukcha, lend me your shirt. I'll go be not ekvar. Va'vaker es abba. Let me go visit my father. Shu chayli is sick. V'holachu matza shemes, and he goes and he finds that he's dead. Koyrei labrias. Koyreya, he be able to rip. He be able to rip. Umachu, and he mend it. V'shiyabe lebeisai machsalu chaluka. He gives it back to his friend. The nice one to make koyrei, and he gives him what the difference because even though it's mended. Right, it's still what? It's still not as valuable. However, when he borrowed it from his friend, if he didn't say, "I'm going to go to visit my father that's sick," he can't touch it. He can't touch it. That would be considered stealing. The Shach says, if you would go ahead, you borrowed it from your friend, and you would rip it without telling him, that's called shlichus yad. We're going to see Bez Hashem, should live and be well. It's quite a while away. There's a concept of if you're a shomer on something and you have no right, you're a shomer, that's it. You can't use it. You can't use it. That's called shlichus yad. If you're shaleach yad, you're a gazlan. So this person, he was able to wear it. He wasn't able to wear it to his father that's sick. So therefore, he'd be considered a gazlan. Someone who rips a stolen beged, guys, someone rips a stolen beged would be Eina Yoitza Yidei Chavatzai. He wouldn't be Yoitza his chi of kriya. I'll tell you a fascinating halacha. I looked this up in Shulchan Aruch. Let's say you rip a garment on Shabbos. You're not supposed to rip on Shabbos, but you rip. Would you have to rip after Shabbos? And the answer is no. You're Yoitza Yechi of kriya. You'll be Yoitza Yechi of kriya. Masha Ein Kain, if you go ahead and rip a stolen garment, you won't be Yoitza. Says the Shach, by Shabbos, there's no din in the Cheftza, it's a din in the Gavra. It's asa for you to rip. Your act of ripping was a good ripping. It happens to be a Shabbos sticker din that. But if you rip a beged, that's not yours. It's not yours. In other words, you had no right. It's not your beged. The halach is rip your beged. It's not your beged. So let's say you have in other words, if you'd have a beged of shatness, who adin, you wouldn't be yaitza. Even if you own it, that would be an afkamina. Very nice. The chilik between the shach and shin mem. Shach and shin mem. Again, it's very easy reading. I find it easy reading. Okay, says the Gemara weiter. Tan Rabbanan. Chayla shemes lemes. A chayla that dies for him, someone who has to be misabel over. Ein moedin I say shemes. You don't let him know. Shema titch of daita love. Maybe he'll lose it. The ein mekarin b'fanov. You don't rip in front of him. There's an opinion. The ein mekarav loy. You don't rip his clothing. There's two days. You don't rip his clothing, or you don't rip your clothing. Or mishasken es hanoshim and mipanov. You tell them, keep quiet. Don't Don't go wail in front of him. A cotton, guys, we would go ahead and rip his clothing as agmas nefesh, that people should see and be misragish. The korin al chamav al chamaisai, a person rips for his father-in-law and his mother-in-law, they covered ishte because they covered of his wife. I spoke at the Rabbi, guys, we don't do this because they're Michael. We don't do this. One does not rip for a father-in-law or a mother-in-law because why? They're Michael. And Bismana said no one does it. No one does it. The Ramah lived in the 16th century, so it hasn't been done for 600 years. Anyway, V'amra Papa Tana ba'Aval Rapsi learns Aval Rapsi, that's Masechta Smachos. Aval lo yaniach tinoik b'teicheka. It's a halacha that people don't know that an Aval is not supposed to hold a child in his lap. If nation mevila they schayk, because it makes them happy. It makes them happy. V'nimsa misgana al abriyos, and it'll be what? It'll be misgana on the brias. When they see him psychic, they'll say he's insensitive, right? Or they'll think he's nuts. He said one hand he's crying, the next minute he's laughing. They think he's not beseder. So therefore, what? One should not play with a child b'shas sitting at rest.